So we've learned the first two concepts. The third concept that made React really popular into what we call this virtual DOM, which is a tree-like object like this that gives React a blueprint of how it should update the actual DOM. So what happens then is React takes all of this and says, hey, here is the actual DOM, or the document object model of the website, and the React little bot over here is going to go look at the blueprint of what it needs to build and modifies the DOM for us. Now, this idea of a unidirectional data flow means that anytime we want something to change on our web page, well, the state has to change. That is, the data has to change in our app. So what happens if, as a user, I click on, let's say, a button? Well, I click on a button. React is going to intercept that and say, hey, somebody just clicked on the bottom. How does that, let's say I click on the sign out button. React is going to say, hey, somebody just clicked on the sign out button. How are we going to change the state? Well, internally, we would say that if somebody clicks on the sign out button, we're going to change is logged in to now say false. And React, as soon as the state changes, reacts to that change and says, hey, the state just changed. Combine the new state and the components we have and update the DOM. You see, the data only flows one way. A better way to think about this is like this. Our application is simply built with this virtual DOM, this JavaScript object that describes our app. And as soon as a state changes, it's going to trickle down that information and let everybody know, hey, the state just changed. If is logged in is now false, display this version of the app. Data can never move up. So for example, the state, as we'll learn, can live in different locations, different components. And if the state, let's say, changes here, the data can never move up. That is, all these changes can only trickle down. Now, this concept is hard to explain without actually seeing it in code. So if you don't get this right away, don't worry. We will explore this idea and revisit this idea of one-way data flow throughout the course. But the key takeaway here is that by having this restriction of data only being able to move down from the state of our application all the way to the DOM, and if any changes or events happen that change the state, well, we go back to the state, and that state change trickles down to different components in one direction is a restriction on how data can move through our app. And by adding this restriction, it's really easy to debug code. For example, if there's something wrong with our sign out function, I can go to wherever the state is logged in lives. Let's say it lives in this top component here. I can go over here and know that this is where the bug is happening. And whatever's underneath this component, well, that's it. I don't have to look outside of the component, or if this tree was massive with thousands and millions of components. I only have to look in the place where the data exists and where the data flows through. Again, this is a really hard concept that we will explore throughout the course. But this idea of one-way data flow is the restriction. And because of this restriction, it's easier for us to understand how our app works. Unlike the arrows and points that we saw with an Angular app, where things got confusing really, really fast.